Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is John and this is your Modern Tech Breakdown. Today I'm taking a look at the ongoing lawsuit between the New York Times and OpenAI. Let's jump into it. So here I have a story from Ars Technica covering the latest rulings from the New York Times lawsuit against OpenAI for copyright infringement. First, let's take note that this lawsuit was launched in December of 2023, and here we are in the spring of 2025, so clearly this case is moving at a glacial speed. But it would seem that there are a lot of claims being made, so I think it makes sense that this is going to take some time to sort out all this detail. But let's get into some of the good news for the New York Times here. So OpenAI tried to argue that the Times claims were invalid because too much time had passed from when the New York Times should have known that OpenAI was using their content. OpenAI relied on a Times article from November of 2020 about how OpenAI was training models on trillions of words on the internet. OpenAI's argument was that the New York Times, based on a single report, should have known that their content was being used and that too much time had passed to now make a claim of infringement. The judge didn't see it that way, and I think he correctly pointed out that it's a little bit ridiculous to expect the New York Times to know that OpenAI's model would be regurgitating almost verbatim Times reporting based on one article talking about training. And how could the New York Times know this even before the product, ChatGPT, even came out? And the key point here is that AI inference is the concern for infringement, not training. I think that is a pattern we're starting to see in these court cases over and over again. Training is not an infringement of copyright, but inference can be if it produces content that is very similar to the original work. So the New York Times gets a win here by being able to keep these claims moving forward. But the New York Times got another win in this case. The judge decided to permit the Times claim that OpenAI allowed its users to manipulate prompts in order to get New York Times content that is ordinarily paywalled. The New York Times can win this claim by showing that OpenAI had reason to know this was happening, and unfortunately for them, it seems that it might be able to prove this as there were multiple media reports about it, and the New York Times directly informed OpenAI that this was happening. So this seems like another potentially significant win for publishers in this ongoing legal debate between AI companies and content publishers. I will point out the judge did dismiss some other claims that the New York Times was making, but I don't think those are nearly as important as some of these other ones. So on balance, to me, this reads like a pretty big win for the Times and other publishers. You never know how legal cases like this are going to work out. There's a ton of evidence and details to this situation that makes it impossible to know what aspects will tip the case in one direction or the other. And it's also new territory for the legal system, so it's really a guessing game at this point. But I think these rulings are definitely a win for the New York Times, and they may be a bit more likely to win the overall case now. That's all I have on this story for today. As always, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you.